We're back at Series 9 of the Dig podcast. And this is a very exciting series because the Business Clinic is back. And we bring the Business Clinic to you once in a while when we feel we really need that actionable advice from experts in lots of different fields. It's brought to you in partnership with Timely Careers, who are right behind us in that mission of bringing advice to people that they can actually put into practice and make changes in their lives and in their working lives as well. You can expect information on managing your finances, managing your relationships, so important, grabbing opportunity. We need to grab opportunity. There's no point in letting it pass us by. We'll only regret it. And also PR for your business. What is that and how do we make the most of it? So it's a really exciting podcast with some brilliant guests who want to help me and want to help you. So buckle up and get ready for the Business Clinic in partnership with Timely Careers.
Welcome back to the Dig podcast, and we're speaking to experts, thought leaders, and people who can just generally help us get our stuff together in the world of work. And this is like a Business Clinic series that we're just entering into. And I am so honored to kick off our Business Clinic series with Susan Hayes Culleton. And I recently met her at the Awaken Hub All-Ireland Female Founders Conference. And do you ever just go to something and you think, I was supposed to go there, because I ran into her and she's a bit like me, like not afraid to stand and chat and have the crack, but also actionable advice too she gave us on the day, and just a real personality. And I just was like, she's going to be a brilliant Dig podcast guest. And she said yes. So I'm so honored to have her here today. And I have a wee intro, but I did say to Susan before we started, like, I don't know her. I don't know everything that she does, but what I have learned so far in the last few weeks, I was determined that she would come on to the podcast and share it with you, because the insights and the learning have been great for me already, and we've only just scratched the surface. But Susan is the managing director, and I have it all written down here, so excuse me for glancing down, because I want to make sure I get all the titles right, because she's done a lot and she's published a lot and she's said a lot. But she is the managing director of HayesCulleton Group, and she's clients across Europe, USA, all over the world. And she's known as the Positive Economist. That's what got me. And it got me because of the word positive, because I like anybody that's positive. And then the word economist, in my head, I'm like, right, that means money and economy, and it's a positive thing. Normally we hear negative things. So I want to know what she has to say. So that hooked me in straight away. But there's so much that Susan does. Like, she writes books, and her latest book is Money Matters. Like, money matters. It does matter in the world of work. So I was intrigued about that. But she's also books such as Positive Economist, and I hope I get this right, The Savvy Woman's Guide to Financial Freedom, unreal, and The Savvy Guide to Making More Money. So even though people say it's not about the money, at the end of the day, money does make the world go round in a lot of ways, and we do need it for our essential living. So I was just like, this woman sounds amazing. Thank you so much for being on the Dig podcast, Susan.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you for being here. So Susan, what is the Positive Economist? What is an economist, and then what is a positive economist?
Well, often people ask me what's the difference between an accountant and an economist, and I say an accountant looks backwards and an economist looks forwards. And that is one way of describing it. So our job by being economists is looking at the trends and what is going on in the world around us, trying to make sense of them, but also highlighting exactly how that affects different parts of our economy. And maybe it's individuals, and that's probably the direction we'll take today, Caroline. Our businesses, and that too, given that you're at the start of the Business Clinic series, but also if it was governments, or if it is a particular sector, or if it is a central bank, or whoever it might be, it's to understand what's going on in the world around them. But the Positive Economist, I'll tell you a brief story about where this came from. And it ties back into your intro, actually, because in 2008 and 2009, I used to be on a radio show on 4FM. And every Friday at 7:30 in the morning, I was bounced into the studio, and at the time, all the economics news was bad. It was all bad. GDP was going the wrong way, unemployment was going the wrong way, the bond yield was going on the wrong way, the lot. And one week I used to be described as a recessionista, and another week I was described as the Positive Economist. And because I always had something positive to say, and I don't mean that I just found the good news. I won't say that. I just always found the opportunity. I found something you could do, a grant that was open, a networking event that was happening, a European subsidy that was available or something. And I said it anyway to my now husband, then boyfriend, afterwards that day. And I said, I was introduced today as the Positive Economist. And he said, that suits you down to a T. Why don't you secure the domain name? And Caroline, you're a woman who knows all around digital marketing and building a brand and everything else. And at the time, blogging was becoming a thing. So I secured the domain name and I started writing under the blog, The Positive Economist. And also in my signature then, in my email, at the bottom, I put down web address, thepositiveeconomist.com, and that was it. So I never actually started calling myself that. It was the blog title that led to, oh, that's Susan Hayes, the Positive Economist, and away we went from there.
Well, that is a big branding exercise that you did without really realizing, because here you are now with, like, I looked on LinkedIn, 20,000 engaged followers that go to you for that positive outlook on our economy, which at times, and a lot of the times, is very bleak. And I know that we're in the Northern Ireland here. You live in the south, but you do work across like all island approach, don't you? Like all over the world, really. So you know about the economy all over the world. I
do, yeah. And I think that there's a lot of reasons to be very positive about the Northern Irish economy. And I can go down any road you want me to go here, but if I just tell you why. So I bumped into you last week because we were both hosting two different conferences in Belfast. And on Tuesday, I was hosting the Belfast Chamber of Commerce Connectivity Conference that was all around what is happening in Northern Ireland around decarbonising the environment, around autonomous vehicles, around all sorts of things. And did you know that already 48.3% of your energy is coming from renewable sources in Northern Ireland? There's also Project Harlander, which is being planned to be the first autonomous vehicle in the UK, where it would be a train that would be running between Titanic, a 1.3 mile long, 15-minute loop around the city all the time. And there is enormous collaboration that's happening across the region between universities and so on. And Caroline, did you know that women in full-time positions in Northern Ireland earn more than men? You actually have a positive gender pay gap in Northern Ireland for full-time workers.
No, I did not know this. I should know this because I was hosting Women in Business conference last week, but that statistic I did not know, and that is very positive.
There you go. So now you know what the Positive Economist is all about.
I absolutely do. And I love that we're starting off positive, because I suppose the people who listen to the Dig podcast, Susan, are people in the world of work, people who work for people, the entrepreneurs, company owners, whatever, but they're all going through the struggles that a lot of business people and people in the world of work face. And especially with the way the economic climate is as such on a whole, with the increased, I suppose, inflation and the wages and all of that going on. But we want to know how we can do things better. What can we do? Because let's face it, I can't change what's happening in government and policy and strategy and all of that, and neither can probably the working person on the ground. But what can we do within our own businesses to be more positive when it comes to our own business economy, I suppose? But I have a few list of things that I've been thinking about and things that I've seen you've covered on your LinkedIn that I think people might really benefit from. So basically, our sales is what makes us our money in our businesses. Can you talk to us about that and how we can approach that positively, as in like sales coming in, sales going out? What should we be doing in relation to analysing our sales?
Okay.
So there's the right way to ask that.
Absolutely. There's 4 key ways of growing your sales, and a lot of us focus on the hardest one. So one way is to bring in new customers. And that is the hardest one because you have to start new relationships. And it does depend on whether you're a business to business or whether you're a business to consumer type of business model. So in our case, for example, when I'm emceeing a conference, that's business to business because I'm selling that as a product or a service directly to an organization. There's one invoice, you could say. On the other hand, you mentioned there about the books. When I'm selling the books online, that's business to consumer because I don't necessarily talk to the individuals who go on to buy a book. And also their digital sales and the amount that you spend on a book is an awful lot less than what you might spend in a business environment. So I'm just going to start off at that point is to clarify, which are you? Are you B2B or are you B2C? Then when it comes to growing your sales, like I said, there's 4 ways of doing it. The hardest one is bringing in new customers because you need to build new relationships if it's B2B, and if it's business to consumer, you might need to invest more in marketing. You might need to be paying for marketing. You might need to put more energy into your marketing activities, etc. So instead, I'm going to focus on the other 3. And the other 3 are a lot easier. So number 1 is to increase the frequency of the deal. And that is increase the number of times that people actually buy from you. Now, if you think about, I'll give you an example of one business that has done this very well, and it'll be familiar to everybody. It's the company HP or Hewlett Packard. So I have a HP printer, And invariably, when the printer runs out of ink, I go to the shop and then I buy another one and away we go. And HP didn't want me doing that. So what they did was they said, how do we increase the frequency at which people buy? So instead, then they created this service called Instant Ink, which is that instead I could predict how much ink I'm going to need. And then they would automatically get me on a system where I would pay X number of years to pay for X number of cartridges per year. So that rather than waiting for the ink to run out, instead there is instant ink. I don't run out ever, and they have much more reliability built into the system. So speaking now to people who are listening to this today, how could this apply to you? Well, number one, is there a way that you can build maybe business to business once-off sales into retainers, particularly if people are coming back to you on an irregular basis, but more often than once? Is there a way you can create a subscription of some sort where you're feeding people what they need on a regular basis? Is there some way that you can build in increased frequency? And there mightn't be, Caroline, right? There mightn't be, but let me give you the lighter, the LITE, the lighter version of this, is that, and you do this very well, by reminding people of your presence, you are reminding them that you're here. Like nobody this morning has got up and said, do you know what now? I would love to give Caroline O'Neill more business. I'd love to put more money into her pocket. You know, Caroline, unfortunately, the only person who thought that this morning is probably you.
Absolutely.
The only way then that you encourage, but on the other hand, people may well be thinking, oh, I really need to reach out to somebody to do X, or we worked with Caroline there a while ago, and like you've some fantastic testimonials on your site. And we really should go back to her now because we're coming up with a summer special, or we're going to be heading into Christmas and we want to get the pipeline done. So by simply being more visible in front of them, whether it is keeping a regular newsletter, whether it is posting on LinkedIn regularly, and I do have my own specific way of doing that, as you might have seen. So that's one way, is increasing the frequency of the deal. That's number one, that I would say the way in which to increase sales. And the second one is to increase the size of the deal. And this is what we typically know as cross-selling or upselling. So I give you another example in our case here. We run work experience programs for companies and organizations across the island of Ireland and beyond. And we run them in such a way where we go into an organization, either in person, hybrid, or digitally, and we will be running a specific initiative for them over a period of time. And I became very aware that we were printing a lot, because we would be bringing our own activity sheets in, or maybe the companies, we'd say to them, we need flip charts or things like that. And then on the other hand, Caroline, you particularly pointed out in your very well researched bio, like we have books that are textbooks, like Positive Economics is, well, that's a thicker book, but Money Matters is basically a workbook for people around financial literacy. So then I thought, okay, I can solve two problems here. One is that if I go back to the companies and say, how about we include a copy of Money Matters for every participant, and then they have the workbook, it also means they have something to take away and go and implement. And then on the other hand, it actually is more sustainable because we're not printing things off, using them once and putting them in the bin. So that was a way in which I increased the size of the deal, as well as was more sustainable, as well as simply brought more value to the customer. So that's the way in which we've increased the size of the deal. So similarly, I would say to people listening today, like what other value can you add into your offering so that then you're simply creating more value for your customer and removing something else they need to do. And then the third one is down to people who were at the conferences that you and I both hosted last week, and that is how to be easier to refer. Because if you can increase the number of referrals that you have, well, then that de facto leads to greater sales as well. But if you can get a referral, it means that part of the relationship is built for you. So there's three things you need to do there. One is be easy to recommend, as in make it like everybody has a spreadsheet. Well, I think of it in terms of spreadsheet, has a spreadsheet in their head where your name is there and there's a 5 or 6 word description beside it. And in many cases, Caroline, in my case, it is the Positive Economist. They know I'm an MC, they know I'm a keynote speaker, they know I'm an economist, they know my style. So make yourself easy to be able to say, oh, sure, yeah, I know Susan, she does, or Caroline, she does. And then the second thing is...
How do you do that? How do you do, for people who are listening, well, is that just about being visible and being on the tips of people's tongue? How do you do that, what you've just said?
I've actually practiced what I've been preaching, is listen to the way people introduce you. And that's why I paid very close attention to what you did with me. And that's also how I got the name The Positive Economist, is simply listen to how people describe you. So it's when people say, oh, sure, Susan, sure, she's very energetic. Like, I don't know I'm energetic because I'm like this all the time. Or, oh, but sure, Susan, she seems to know the way in which, how the economy interacts with technology, and she does an awful lot of work with young people. I listen to all of that, Caroline. I listen to all of that, because that is when they're articulating the spreadsheet that's in their head. So for start there. Simply listen to how people introduce you, even informally. Let's say if you're asked them, say, oh, wait here now until I introduce you to Caroline. She's from the Zig podcast. And whatever I would say next is what's in that spreadsheet. The second thing, of course, you can do is, because we're now in the age of AI, is ask AI how people refer to you, because it'll know. It will know. If you're digitally present at all, it will know. And ask it, how do I optimize this? And then the third thing you can do is actually go to a personal branding consultant, or perhaps a business coach as well. I've done all of the above, all of them. But particularly the one that I said at the beginning, listening to how people introduce me, that's my number one. That's my go-to.
Really,
because
really
that is
really good tip.
And that is the latest version, though. That's the latest version of the way in which you would describe me. That is how you see me. And I don't have to go back and update. I can't update your bio like I can update my website. So that's what I would do. The second thing then is when people refer you, act quickly, because they're investing some of their social capital in you. And it's awful if you introduce somebody and then they just don't get back. And then you think, oh God, now I have to go and apologize for somebody not getting back. I don't want to do it again. All that sort of thing. And then the third thing is say thank you. Like, simply say thank you. People love to help others. And I would say that, I think I would say that particularly of the entrepreneurial community. But the reason I'm slightly hesitating is I don't know, just like what you said earlier on in your intro. See, I was listening very carefully. I don't know what I don't know either. So I don't know, maybe there is this same sense of community in other parts of our workplace. But people do genuinely like to help others. So go back and thank them for helping you. And then, Caroline, and only then, try to find new customers.
Yes. That is such good advice there. I knew you'd be actionable, because sometimes I speak to people and they're very textbook theory and we can read things anywhere, but I want real life examples and ways we can do it, and you just give it. So that's really, really good. And how people describe you, I just think that's brilliant. And that's a key for, if you want to change, if people are describing you and that's not how you want to be, then that's when you know you need to change. But okay, that's great. So that's about getting sales in. How do we get the sales in? The actionable things we can do to get more sales and analysing that. What about the key word that every person talks about, doesn't want to talk about? Cash.
Yeah.
So let's talk about cash flow, especially. I know you know a wee bit about my background, but I was an occupational therapist, as you both know. But then I had a shop, and I had a retail shop for 12 years, and cash flow killed me in that retail store. And I work with a lot of people in the retail sector, and hospitality, everything, cash flow. Talk to us about cash flow.
Okay. So first of all, cash flow is a thing. It is an asset that you have. It is a tool that you have. And it's not something that you need to be passive about, is what I would say. So I'll give a couple of things here that I do. So number one, I would invest in some accounting technology. When I started off first, Caroline, I obviously had a bank account and I had a load of Word documents that were invoices, but I still knew what was kind of coming through. Then after that, I won't go through all of what happened along the way, but by now we've got accounting software. So I can log in today and I can see, okay, how much cash is in the bank, but I can see how much is outstanding. I can see what we owe. I can see when it's due to be owed, etc. And none of this takes an awful long time in order to make sure that it's there. In fact, it takes less time now for somebody to do, and it's not me anymore that does it, but it takes less time now for somebody to do what they need to do on that than it used to be with me saving templates and Word documents, etc. And I spend €20 a month on that. So when I say invest, I'm spending €240 a year. So about £200 on that software. Like, that's it.
And what do you recommend? What software do you recommend? I know I know maybe it's different for different sectors, but what do you recommend?
So I use QuickBooks, and that was because our accountant recommended it for us. So that's not to say that it's the best out there. It's the one that we use as a result of who our accountant said. So I'm sure there's brilliant ones out there like Xero and like and a range of other, and Sage and so others. But I would say you don't have to spend an awful lot of money to manage this really well. Second thing is invoice promptly, is send out your invoices promptly. Now, this is the difference between you and me in a shop, is that I'm in an environment where often, again, I'm in a B2B, I'm in a business to business, and where often I will need to do the work before I can send out the invoice, or that might be the way it is. But if let's say I do a job on Tuesday, the 1st of June, and then I send out the invoice on Friday, the 12th of June. I'm trying to work out my numbers there to make sure they're accurate, and I don't think I did well. But anyway, so So let's just say I invoice 10 days later. I'm extending the amount of cash that I can get in myself by not taking action. And now, again, because I'm not the person who sends out invoices in the company anymore, like now we've set up an automation so that as soon as a job is done and it's marked as done in our project management system, she gets an automation to say, please send out the invoice. So we've automatically built in a trigger system now to make sure that that's done. And then there's two other things.
Just to jump in there, this is off. Like, here's my mindset sometimes about sending out invoices, and this is terrible, and I'm going to change this. I can't send it too quick.
Yeah.
It's not terrible, isn't it? I'd be thinking, oh, I can't send it too quick because does that look like I'm sending it too quick? Like, oh, she's only just done the job. But when you said that now, that's why my cash flow is probably not as good, because I'm not as quick off the mark as I should be. And then they don't be as quick off the mark to pay me. And then it's just a big vicious circle, right?
Right. I'll tell you how to fix that now. A very simple question is simply to ask, so when it comes to me sending in the invoice, what is the best process? Is it for me to send it in beforehand? Is it for me to send it in the day of? Is it, if you're, let's say you're hosting an event, is it in 2 or 3 days afterwards when things settle? Will you tell me what I can do to make your systems better?
Okay, I love that.
That's it. That's all you need to do. And sometimes say, oh God, will you send it in beforehand because I don't want to be dealing with that afterwards. And then you're actually creating a problem for them by sending it in afterwards when they're trying to do everything else.
Okay, I love it. Okay, right, that's what I'm going to do. Okay, keep going.
Okay, so the next thing I would say as well, and I'm going to give you another question when it comes to following up on invoices that are extending the credit term. So typically in the industry, when I say the industry, I mean in industry in general, we can have 30 days credit, right? So people often have the very same reaction, Caroline, around like, oh, I don't want to be following up on the invoice like on the 31st day. Whereas here's the way to handle that, is on the 31st day, is say, dear Caroline, we sent the invoice a month ago, and could I kindly check in on the status of the invoice? That's all you need to ask. What I know what you might want to say is, where is the money? Or like, do I need to worry here? But and people don't want to say that. What they want to know is the answer to the question that I've just asked, which is, what is the status of the invoice? And this can be, if somebody has forgotten something, it's enough of a trigger to say, oh, sorry, we get a process today, or else they'll say, it's going to be in the next pay run or whatever it is. But by asking that question, you take away the emotion, the relationship you've built with the customer is just fine. And you have just asked the question, which is what you want the answer to. The last thing I'll say on cash flow is this, is it is an asset, which means that it's a bargaining tool. And there have been times when I've had to work with suppliers where I thought, okay, the price is worth it, but I can't afford it. So here's what I'm going to do. Caroline, absolutely, I see the value in that. And I know you're charging £500 per X. How about we do this? I'm guessing you're going to send me an invoice and your credit terms are 30 days. But how about if we reduce it to 475 and we'll pay you on the day? Because you're taking the cash flow that you have, because you probably have an ability to pay it on the day. Now, we are a very fast payer because I like to be able to put cash in people's pockets so that they can go on and then move on with their lives. And it does, as the neighbour, we had a neighbour at home 2 doors up from us where I grew up in Cork, and she used to say, short accounts make long friends. And that's always stayed in my mind. That said, if you can use your cash flow to actually negotiate on the basis of price, if you can pay upfront, that's a very simple way, and it has saved us a lot of money over the years.
That takes confidence, doesn't it? That takes confidence to have
it's only a question. It's just, and you see, that's all they are, is that for you and me who run our own business, we think, okay, if we ask for money, is that like a negative in the relationship? If you have somebody else doing this for you, they see this as a to-do list item. So it's simply a question. So I asked you, what time are we going to have our recording today? And you didn't say, oh my God, I can't believe she's asking me what time we have the recording today. Like, it's simply a question. So it's saying, oh, I'm also conveying this question in such a way where I'm saying, I know there's value in £500 per X, but I can't meet that, or that doesn't feed into our pricing structure, whatever way you want to say. Instead of trying to negotiate with you on that basis, how about I do something else of value to you, which is pay you upfront? That's simply a question.
Wow.
And if you say no, that's fine. Well, then we'll see. Then if we can't do business, we can't do business. If I have to try and figure out a way to increase back up to your level, and maybe I can and maybe I can't, but it has made the difference. And you can see it in people's eyes. They're thinking, hold on now, actually that does mean something different to me. If I get £500 per X multiplied by X on the 1st of June, let's say, instead of Friday the 12th of June, when they themselves have been invoiced accordingly, it does help them. So you are doing something that can be of value to them. That's what it's all about. Zig Ziglar says, You can get anything you want as long as you give everybody what they want. So that's all. That's all that's to it.
You can get anything you want as long as you give everybody what they want.
Yeah.
Okay. And
like
okay.
in corporate language, they call that like alignment, but that's what Zig Ziglar says. So as long as I can give you what you want, which is maybe you want to be paid earlier, or maybe I don't want to have to think about it coming up with a Christmas campaign. Maybe you'll do that instead for me by reaching out to me now or whatever. Yeah, just find a way to find out what people want and then find a way of giving it to them. It's all the businesses.
You're an economist, but you're a marketeer too. Like I can feel it deep down there.
Yeah, it's funny. You're not the first person that has said that, and I think that might be because as a business person, one needs to be a salesperson, and sales are driven by marketing anyway. But it's back before the business was set up. Myself and my now husband, then boyfriend again, we went on a couple of digital marketing courses. I'm going to say like back in 2008 and 9. And they weren't in Ireland at the time. We went to London. We went to them for this because he really saw that this was, blogging but that was embryonic at that stage, but e-commerce, he could really see that this was really developing. And so the two of us went on a couple of courses around it. So I think I got some early principles, Caroline, before a lot of other things were happening. So you are right, but it's no accident.
Well, look, you need to be a wee bit of both, I suppose, a bit of everything really whenever you're the forefront of your business, but you can see there, you understand that concept. What about, you can have loads of money in the bank, but do you have any money? So what about profit? Like talk to us about profit, because, often you look at a very healthy bank balance, but your business isn't very profitable. And I suppose that happened me in my retail store, Christmas, busy times. I was like on fire and the bank balance was unreal. And oh my God, did I owe some amount of money to people? So talk to me about profit margin.
Yeah. Okay. So I would first of all ask people who are listening today is, do you know your profit per customer and do you know your profit per product? And if you don't, a lot of people don't. And now that you know that, please go and change that. So I'm not trying to say that, you need to know this for everything, but what I am saying is that it is important to gain this intel, and a lot of people don't have it.
Are you struggling to find new talent and address gaps in your business? Have you considered creating more dynamic and flexible working conditions? Are you wanting to enhance your gender diversity and showcase your progressive recruitment policy? Then you need to connect with Timely Careers. Timely Careers is a coaching, skills and job platform created by the WIB Group. It connects highly ambitious, skilled women with career opportunities that allows them to return to work more flexibly and also meets the needs of the employer, which is so important. Timely Careers has over 1,400 candidates, 70% of which hold degrees. They range across all sectors and they are willing and ready to get back into the world of work. By advertising your job on Timely Careers, you can tap into that pool of candidates and also help grow our economy. Find out more on timelycareers.com.
So first of all, when it comes to profit per customer, this is like, if I take two very different customers here, I want to take another example now of something that we do. I'm going to take consultancy, right? We keep it broad. So I'm brought in to do some piece of consultancy, and I'd say, okay, I know that this is going to take X amount of my time, and it's going to take 10 hours of somebody else's time. And then there's also going to be some form of outsourcing that we need as well. And right, that's that, isn't it now? So I'm going to price that at £10,000, and I'm going to probably make, back of an envelope, I'm probably going to make £3,000 profit on that. If you listen to my rationale there, Caroline, what I absolutely haven't factored in is how much customer service time is going to be taken into consideration. I haven't thought about the emails and the calls and the debriefs and will you change this and will you change the logo to that. I haven't factored that in at all. And that's often where people fall down, is not factoring in the time that it takes. And the reason that I wanted to think of a separate example is, if we take two customers and I'm pricing the same thing, but one of them is much more demanding than the other. One of them has a culture of like just emailing all the time, just emailing on. And some people have, and they can be very responsive. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying, if you email, if a company is emailing you all the time and you need to respond, then there's time involved in that. And it's easy to not see that when you're starting off or when you work on your own, because you think, look, that's the cost of doing business. How quickly this changes when you have to pay somebody else to do it, because then it becomes an explicit cost. Like you're talking about in your own case in the shop. You might say, oh, well, should I be in the shop anyway from such a time to such a time? Yeah, but what about if you have to pay a second person to be there? And if they're not doing anything and you still have to pay them, then how does it feel around that sense of customer service? Another thing as well is, I'm going back to the point that earlier on about how to bring in sales, is that I always factor in 20% cost of marketing. So the time that I spend on LinkedIn, the time that we spend on the newsletter, the time that we spend following up with customers, like we now have project managers in our business who do an awful lot of this. So I now earmark that in, because again, I didn't see that as in the beginning when I started off, I didn't see those as costs. And then if I take some very explicit ones, like you've talked about, like sales, retail, and then money in the bank. How does money get into the bank if you're selling online? Well, you probably have to pay some sort of a provider, like maybe it's Stripe, or maybe it's Relex, or maybe it's one of the e-commerce providers. A lot of people don't factor that in because it's a small cost, and they're delighted to get sales into their website, or else packaging and all of those sorts of things. So what I would say is, it's really useful to simply take the time to stop and look at your pricing, but specifically your costs per product, and then similarly per customer, and just see, is there room for improvement? And Caroline, I will even say this, are there loss-making products you have, or loss-making customers that you have? Because there may be. And if there are, then you need to do something about it, because the harder you work, the more you lose. And it's a very hard, very, very hard place to be. And I've been there where I realized, oh my God, we have totally overpromised here, or whatever, or I've underpriced it, or whatever. But knowing it is one thing, but doing something about it then is the next.
Oh, there's so many people listening to this, and myself included, over-promised, and deliver with the expertise they're known for, but didn't really make any money. And that's the problem here. So how do you, and I know we've talked about confidence before, it's confidence in pricing. How did you get, was it just making mistakes and realizing you didn't want to do it again? But how do you get that confidence to add in those extra costs in your head and be firm with that to a client or customer?
Okay, so first of all, if you don't kind of really know what you're offering in the first place, it's very hard to do that. So if I don't send you an email beforehand and say, right, this is all that I'm going to do, it's very hard then for me to go back and say, and by the way, because you've asked me to do more, I am now charging you for it. But like, and I remember having this conversation with a client one time. We've developed our own proprietary registration system for the work experience programs that I mentioned to you, because we found a lot of companies were having to like set up spreadsheets and Google Forms and all this sort of stuff, and dealing with, like, John can't come today because he's going to the doctor, and somebody else's football match, or those types of things. So we said, you know what, we'll design our own customer service and registration system. We'll take that problem off you, and we did. And then I remember talking to one customer where we run their work experience for them. And then I said, do you want to take the registration system? And they said, no, it's fine, we'll do it ourselves. But would you just do X, Y, and Z? Now, X, Y, and Z was about half of what the offering was. And that's then is where I said, well, we can, but if we do, well, then we can simply charge you a smaller amount for that. But it's because I knew the parameters of what we were offering, I didn't allow that sort of scope creep to settle in. So I said, absolutely, we can, but I just need to go and price that then accordingly. Another way is you can signpost things that people sometimes think will come for free. And an absolute one, Caroline, we both know this, is that when it comes to, let's say, emceeing a conference, or when it comes to moderating a panel or things like that, sometimes people think that, and a lot of people do this for free. We both know that. Like, some people do the type of work that we do, and they do it on a free basis. Now, I don't anymore. I did years ago, but I don't anymore. And so sometimes if I need to signpost that early in the conversation, I'll say something like, somebody will say, oh, dear Susan, we're running such and such conference, and we'd love if you were available to speak at it, let's just say. What is your availability? And the way in which I go back to that, and I'd say, thank you very much, Caroline. I'm delighted that you came to me on that. I am actually available on that particular date. Would you like to set up a call so that then I can create a cost and content proposal?
Love that.
So I've signposted, and therefore it gives them then an out. If they need to say to me, thanks a million, Susan, we've actually found someone else, then everyone's fine. You know, no one has to say anything that nobody wanted to. So signposting early on in the conversation. Prevention is better than the cure, Caroline. It's certainly better than the cure. And then also, when it comes to actually, I will say this about price increases as well. A lot of people don't know how to introduce a price increase. And I'm not saying that I'm the be all and end all for this, but here's what I do. First of all, as I would say, you're hearing your name, I know 100 times in this, because I'm role playing all of these with you here now. But
Yeah.
I would say, dear Caroline, it is now the time that it is. I am writing to you because in 6 months' time, we will be increasing our prices. I really value your custom, and I didn't want to introduce this to you on a, as a surprise. And I also want to give you some time to reflect this possibly in your own pricing thereafter. The reason that we're increasing is, number one, we haven't increased prices in 3 years. Number two, as you're probably aware, there's a lot of inflation and cost of businesses are rising. And number three, maybe the terms of our services changed, or we're now doing more for you or whatever. So I give a reason. I don't say, yeah, we're putting up our prices there by 10%. Is that okay? Is that I give a reason for it. And then I would say, so now that, you have time to introduce this, would you like to have a call and we can discuss it? And so that's the way I do it. And I give them time. And maybe some customers will walk away. And if they do, I have to be prepared for that. But because if I'm not prepared for that, well, then I will see all of those things happening and prices increasing, costs increasing, and then, we can get squeezed, and I have too much responsibility to let that happen. But it's interesting what happens in a response to that. Some people say, yeah, grand, end of, right? Some people, and this one is so hard to take, sometimes people say, oh, so you've got sense. About time you did it. And I'm like, why didn't you tell me to increase how much I was charging you long ago? And then some people say, okay, Susan, we need to have a chat about that. And I, quite recently, I think it was around about at the turn of the year. So I said, I sent this email to somebody anyway, and they came back and they said, look, we are going to have to review now how many people go through it. It was a training program at the time. We're going to have to review the number of people that go through the training. Like, we're possibly going to have to increase the maximum you're going to take, etc. And I said, okay. I said, right, let's have the conversation. We had the conversation, and now the price has gone up. So the ways and means, Caroline, there's techniques to everything. None of this is luck or, oh, I wish I just was born with the confidence to use the words. They're all skills. You can learn everything.
I recently, oh God, where do you have the most conversations? At an Irish wake? But I was at an Irish wake recently, and I was talking to a business owner, and we were talking about work and life and increased costs. And this girl said to me, and I won't say her name, but I know she listens to the podcast, so hopefully she resonates with this and can get some action. She said, I had to put up my prices, and I was so sick that I couldn't tell people to their faces. I put a notice on the door, and then I actually was in the process of hiring someone at the front desk anyway. And I'm so glad that they now are the person that and she still hides behind her prices. And I said what you said, like, but you should actually be dear. You do that good job. You're brilliant. She's like, I know, but I always feel sick putting the price up. And I think maybe it's an Irish thing. Maybe it's I don't know if people in other, you work all over the world. Is there people in other areas of the world that feel the way we do, that we don't want to take people's money off them? What is that?
In America, you don't get this as much. I will say that you certainly don't get as much. Yeah, because I think we've a very close relationship with it. I think people who run their own business knows the value of money very, very well. And they also, I think, feel a sense of, if you're taking money off people, it's now a decrease in the value that they have. But I learned this in 2006 when I was actually working. It was one of my summers in college, and I was working in a hardware shop, and the man that was teaching me how to do this, he wouldn't even, I'd say, recognize that he taught me as much as he did. But I am a sponge, and I do learn a lot from people. And I remember him saying to me something that I never forgot. And he said, all you need to do to sell is highlight that the value of what you're offering them is worth more than the value of the money in their pocket. Therefore, Caroline, when we're selling, if people are buying from us, they see that the value that they have in their lives, if I want to make it dramatic, has increased as a result of them giving us their money. And let me just turn this around, because I remember one woman, she was in a cosmetics business, and this was really holding her back. And I said, okay, like, my take on this is that you have an obligation to the people who you create your products for, who love them, to stay in business if you want to stay in business. And you're actively holding back a service from them by simply not charging, because you will run out of road. You either financially, or you will get sick of it. And I said, then what? Then what do you do? What do you do to turn around to your customers then and say, well, I didn't want to charge people who were willing to give me money for a product that they loved, and now I can't give it to anyone.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that'll help people realize that they need to have confidence on this issue, because prices rise, and you become more skilled as well, and your service improves, and there's reasons. So that's unreal advice. And I hope that lady still listens to the podcast that I had that conversation with, because she is amazing at her job, and she did deserve the money to go up. What about, and this is a big thing, and this is something that I have battled with recently, and I've started to do, and it actually has helped change. And I read it on your LinkedIn. So you do change lives. I know you know, but you do without even realizing by posting on LinkedIn. When you hear no, find out why.
Oh, all the time. Yeah. Like, you know, when I hear people saying about conducting market research, and often market research is done in a hypothetical scenario. I don't know if you did that, Caroline, at the beginning of the podcast, where you said, if I create a podcast and I was to do all of these three things, would you listen to it, or would you listen to it all? And hypothetical market research is very valuable, and we learn an awful lot from it because we have only one perspective. But when you put a proposal in front of someone and there's a price on it and they say no, that is moving from the hypothetical into the reality. And I absolutely all the time go back and say, now I don't go back in a kind of a huffy puffy, say, oh, why didn't you buy from me? What was wrong with me? I go back and I say, I appreciate your point of view, simply in the interest of learning what the issue was. What was it that made either you choose somebody else or something? And sometimes it is, again, if I go back to us both in hosting conferences, like I was asked to host a conference this week and I couldn't because of a clash of a date. And as a result, they went with somebody else. Like that's understandable. You know, that is understandable. There was only one of me, and this was a date that this conference organizer needed to go ahead with. Nothing I could change about that. But maybe it was that somebody else was more suitable in they had come from a certain background, or maybe it was that they had been referred in by somebody or whatever. Or maybe it is that my messaging was wrong. I've often had this as well, where somebody would say, well, we chose them because they do this. And I'd say, but we do that. And they'd say, but it's not on your website, or you didn't put that in the proposal. And that's something you can really, really learn from, like really, really learn from. So absolutely, every no. So what we do in our project management system is that for every opportunity that comes in, it's filed under what needs to happen next. So is it that we need to send a quote, send a proposal, book a follow-up call, etc. And then when it gets to the top of the pipeline, then what we do is we'd say it's either closed won, okay, and then off we go, we move into implementation mode. If it is something that's like, yeah, not at the moment, we move it into future potential. And if it's no, well, then I simply go back and find out why, and I note it down. And then, and only then, we make a decision about, well, would we have wanted to change that? Like, I couldn't change my availability for this week, but could we change something in the website? Yes. I remember somebody one time said, like, we do financial training. And they said, well, could you do customer service training? And I said, well, it's not something we do, so no. Or time management training, it's not something we do, so no. Then we make a decision, okay, that still goes to the top of the pipeline, it goes into closed last. But then we say, would we have done anything different? We wouldn't, because that's just not who we are. So asking, I ask all the time. Yeah. And in a curious, like a keenly curious way.
Yeah, because I suppose for the likes of the podcast, I can't create a podcast without a partner. And I would be speaking to a lot of potential partners all the time. And I have had like a few, like I've had a lot, let's be honest, of people saying no. And I read it on your, and they would have said, no, it's not right now. But I'd never dived any deeper, and I just went away feeling so deflated.
Yeah.
Like, why are they like, this is not right? Why? This is brilliant for them. And I read it on your LinkedIn, and then another PR person that I reached out to and said, what do you think is wrong with my proposal or whatever? And she said, like, did you ever go back and ask them why? And I was like, no, I didn't. And then I thought of you, and I went back and asked why. Someone gave me a really good pointer as to why it wasn't right. It was the level of packages or whatever. I tweaked it, and now we're in talks. So anyway, This isn't about me, but you helped me with that. And I think people need to get more confident with asking why. I think people are afraid. They're afraid to ask why in case it's maybe like too negative, but actually it's learning, isn't it?
Well, it is. And also the question that I would ask, if say the timing isn't right now, will say, well, how would I know when the timing is? And sometimes as well, you can turn it around in that conversation when they might say, well, you know, and look, the other thing too, Caroline, is we go back to, you know, that cultural sense of saying no. A lot of people don't want to say no, so they'll say something else. Like they'll say, oh, you know, some nebulous response. And that's why I think it's important to, rather than try to, you know, pin them down to saying something, is actually instead is give them an out. And that's why I say, sure, certainly very happy to have a call with you, and then I can prepare a content and cost proposal. That's my way of saying, if you want to proceed, you now know that that's the basis on which we'll be working. And if you don't, I'm giving you an out here where you kind of don't have to come back to me, or you say we've got someone else, or it's not, you know, now is not the right time, or whatever. There is a little bit of a dance there, and but dance, go with it.
Dance. Oh, definitely. I've learned so much from doing that. So thank you for sharing that advice. And sometimes you just need somebody to give you the nerve to do it. So thank you. What about when you're in the great position, which you think is the great position, it's actually not a great position because you're frazzled, when you're converting every lead, as you talk about, and you can't cope because there's only one of you and everybody wants you and you're converting them all. What do you do?
Okay, first of all, that sounds like an ideal scenario, right? And I know people are listening today thinking, what do you do? Well, then you just do it all. I know what it feels like to be too busy and afraid to say it to anyone, including myself, and really afraid of sounding ungrateful and feeling, whatever the word is, maybe it's overwhelmed, maybe it is exhausted, maybe it is wanting to feel sorry for yourself, but having no reason to do so. I know how it feels, right? So first of all, I would say is if you're feeling any of those, number one, it's okay. It's okay to say it and vocalize it, and it is important to say it to somebody so that it gets out of your mind. The second thing that I would say is if you are converting every lead, perhaps your pricing is wrong, and perhaps you need to have a higher price, or maybe you need to have a more stringent criteria, because we're changing supplier actually of one particular service that we use because they are too busy and they can't handle us. They can't handle whoever they're dealing with anymore. And you don't want to be in that position where you're converting the leads, but the leads turn into unhappy sales. And when you say you're the only one that's doing it, does that need to continue to be the case? And sometimes if you're really, really busy, it's the wrong time to think about that, because you think, God, if I brought on someone, where would I find them? How would I train them? That would take so much more time. I'm better off doing it myself. And I got I remember being in that kind of cycle of, we're really busy, we need someone, but if I don't have the time to take on someone, so I still have to deal with the really busy, and that kind of, circle. And I remember sitting down with a friend of mine called Caroline Reedy, and she runs the HR suite. She's one of the best in the business in HR across the island. And she says to me, don't make any hiring decisions based on today. Make it on where you think you need to be in between 6 months to 12 months. And I said, Caroline, I can't see that far. Well, she says, don't make the mistake of not seeing that far because you haven't time today. And it is a very good point. If it is the case that it's only you and you want to keep it that way, well, then you have to do something. Perhaps it is increase the amount you charge and reduce the amount that you do. And the minute I say that, I know people will say, yeah, but then what if I lose loads of business? But you have to take that risk, because the risk of you not doing that is then staying put, and you will be in this constant run. Or there's also that sense of, what if the economy changes? And by the way, I've been through that twice. One was COVID, when we lost a third of our business in 48 hours. And also I set up the business in 2010. So I've seen what that is like. But the risk of doing nothing is that nothing will change. And that means that you will relentlessly be in this situation. So what can you do? One, potentially increase your price. Two is make the criteria of working with you a little bit more stringent. And just maybe saying no to more. And there's lovely ways of saying no. There's very, very kind ways of saying no. And I'm conscious of the time we have, Caroline, so you can tell me whether, if you want me to elaborate on those.
No, go on ahead.
Well, one of them might be, we can't actually take this on at the moment, but here's the number of somebody who might be able to work with you. And here's what hospitality does really well. We're booked out in our hotel tonight, but here's the number of a B&B down the road. There's lovely ways of doing that. There's also the exclusivity complex, which is that we're currently booked out at the moment, but we can put you on a waiting list, which actually increases the prestige, if that's the case. And then there's also just lovely ways of saying, I know we'd love to take on this business at the moment. We don't have the bandwidth because we're like really busy at the moment. If there's, I'm very happy to give you some direction, let's say if it is to somebody else, or send you towards a resource that can help you take it from there. So it doesn't just have to be flat out no. There's certainly nice ways of doing it. There's lots of times that I'm asked to speak at events and I can't do it. National Women's Enterprise Day is an example, or International Women's Day is an example. There's lots of things happening. And in those cases, I will often, Caroline, I will say, I can't do it, but can you tell me more? Were you coming to me? This is going back to, that listening to how people describe you. What were you coming to me for? And they might say, well, I was coming to you because to speak about women and money. I was coming to you to speak about an economic outlook, or I was coming to you to speak about what does the next generation of people, what are they thinking about? I spoke at the Careers Teachers Summit in Ulster University last week, for example. And then I'd say, okay, let me think about who I would go to if I was booking a conference and I was running it and I was emceeing it and I needed a keynote speaker. And then you can make two people happy. So there's loads of ways of saying no. But if the risk is, if you do nothing, nothing will change.
So good. And I don't know, have you ever heard or met Laura Bonner that owns Muff Liquor?
Yes, I have heard of her. I believe she's part of the Awaken Up community as well.
She is.
Yes, indeed.
So Laura, this story, and then I know this isn't about my stories, but what you've just said, she has been pitching her vodka, gin and whiskey all over the world, but she also takes with her other Irish brands in her bag. And if the person says, no, we don't like your vodka, she finds out why, and she say, okay, well, why don't you try one of my competitors' vodka? She says, because if I can't have it, I want someone else to benefit from. And I thought, wow, and just what you've said there, like, you can't go to the conference, you can't, but you're going to give somebody else the opportunity, help the person and help them. You remind me of her. If more people did that, imagine what the circle of people we would have. Isn't that so good?
Well, you can make two people happy then where I introduce them to somebody else. And the other thing is they may well say, oh, okay, oh yeah, well, we weren't actually looking for someone in that particular area, but we often have events and we're often looking for people to speak. So I might reach out to them separately. And that's how you increase your referrals then respectively for the other person, because they're easy to recommend or whatever way that goes. So but I'd often do that though, Caroline. Like I saw the other day, there was a funded trade mission out to Sicily for people in the food trade. And I sent it on to a couple of people that I knew there, just because I was sitting on a train between one stop and another. And I said, okay, well, I have 10 minutes here. Who could I think of? Just cause, like, I love when serendipity is kind to me. So it's nice if I can be kind to it. And so, yeah, the wheel turns.
Taking a break in the middle of the podcast just for a little second to ask for your help. Over the past 9 series, I've been overwhelmed by your support. There's so many of you listening, thousands and thousands every month listening to the actionable advice, but still some people haven't subscribed or followed on the channel that they're listening. So if you're listening to this and you think, that's me, I haven't done that, it would be brilliant if you could just take a second and hit follow on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or if you hit the subscribe button on YouTube. It means that the Dig podcast can keep growing and can keep getting great guests on that can actually help change our lives. Thank you, and let's get back to the business clinic.
Absolutely. And it's just such a good message to get out. What about the statement? And I know we're coming to the end, flip and talk all day. Like, I mean, you need to come back again. Maybe you will, but you can send me an email about what that might look like. But what gets measured gets managed. What does that mean?
Well, this goes back to why I have a dashboard in my accounting software where I can go in right now and I can tell you what we owe, what's owed to us, what our sales are this year. I can tell you the profit per customer. I can tell you all of that. And the reason I'm saying this is that it's easy for me quickly to look at that and make a decision. If we had no idea who owed money to us, there are probably other people on the other end of that who would have maybe not the best way of which they manage their invoices, and we might never get paid. It's not a small example, it's an obvious example. But when you watch out for things, then you will see how to, number one, with the level that they're at, and number two, you will see ways in which to improve them. And that's where I learned these things. Like, if we have got a lot of money outstanding, well, then you need to follow up promptly. And I remember one time having a tax deadline and thinking, oh God, if only I had sent out the invoices at the time that I could have sent them out, we would now be in a better position. And gratefully, I never made that mistake again. And now nobody needs to make that mistake again because we have the automation in there. So when I say what gets measured gets done is, if there are KPIs that you look at, key performance indicators, or Google has a difference, they call them OKRs, objectives and key results. It then holds you accountable to being able to see what you're moving towards. And if I could just maybe, because as you say, I know we're coming to time, I'm just going to give you something I learned from the book Atomic Habits. Let's say that you want to implement a new habit. And Caroline, I'm going to again try you out here for something, right? So let's just say that you need to practice every day asking for the sale, right? Because that's something we haven't talked about is how you ask for the sale. And let's say that's something I really need to get into the habit of it. And I often procrastinate around it, etc. Here is something, right? So imagine that you set up, let's say you have a Revolut account or any bank account, and then you create a vault, or a pocket is what it's called in Revolut now. And every day that you ask for a sale, you put £1 into that pocket, or £10 or £5. And when you put money into that, then you can spend it on anything you want, right? On anything at all you want. You might say, so I'm going to give money to myself. Like, what difference is that going to make? It's because you're actually measuring it. And I've done this for habits that I need to implement. Small ones that just make a difference. And I know what it's like. And I've had this, like, even if it is a penny, it's interesting what happens when you can't give yourself that £1 because you didn't ask for the sale today. And then what you start doing is you start just being on kind of high alert for, who could I ask for the sale for? Who could I ask for the sale for? Hold on now, I have a proposal outstanding. I sent that 2 weeks ago. Oh, that's a great opportunity. Is because you're measuring it. And also your brain is getting a reward system. Doesn't matter how much, it gets a reward. Then if I know I'm going to get the £1 in there, and put in whatever money you want. Let's say it's £10 a day. And if you do it 5 days in a row, then you have £50 to go off and spend it in a massage. Powerful way of incentivizing. And particularly that works. And I'm just going to stray away from money here for a moment. If let's say where you're trying to give yourself the habit of not doing something, right? So let's take food. I'm not going to eat chocolate, right? I'm not going to eat chocolate for the rest of the week, for the rest of the month. And why am I doing that? Because I want to look great for my bikini bod, let's say, or whatever. And that's grand the first day and the second day and the third day, and that's grand. But then, like, you just love, insert your favorite chocolate bar. How do you reward yourself for not doing something? It's the same. Is if you say, right, if I don't eat that Twix bar, I can give myself £10 towards a massage, or the money that I'm going to be spending on my holidays, or whatever it might be. Then you're getting the reward for not doing something, and it totally changes that habit around. And I've used that quite extensively, whether it's for business or whether it's for personal. And I got that one from Atomic Habits, and it's very powerful. And you can enjoy the money that you give yourself all the more.
Atomic Habits. Okay, I've never read that. I've heard a lot of people mention it, so it's obviously worth the read.
It is indeed. Atomic Habits by James Clear. That's right.
I know we've no time, just a wee bit of time. Can I ask you about asking for the sale? Because that's really key. Can you touch on anything there? Give us a bit of...
I can, of course. Yeah. So asking for the sale is, first of all, a lot of it comes down to just doing it, right? But what I find, this is the same as cash flow. You just need a question to ask. You just need a question. Now, what people don't like saying is, so Caroline, will you buy from me? And they don't like saying that because it's too personal, and it's almost like I'm asking you to judge me and choose if you like me, right? So you need to find a way in which you ask a question in such a way that it feels comfortable to ask and natural to ask. But again, where there's an out, someone needs to be able to say no to you. So when it comes, I'm going to say training. Let me go back to that one. This is one I use all the time. And so you reach out to me and you say, we want to run a two-day program on leadership, and we want to run a 2-day program around financial management for our leadership staff, right? Let's just say that's it. Now, what I don't know, Caroline, is whether you're talking to 10 other providers about this. I don't know if you're kind of, checking things out, or if you're genuinely serious about this. And here's the way I close the sale. Is I'd say, okay, Caroline, now, have you got any more questions? No, Susan, that's great. Now, if I leave that open, right, I'll close that Zoom call, or I'll close that meeting, and I really am none the wiser as to whether you'll buy from me or not. And this one question changes that. So, Caroline, will we look at dates in the diary then? Here's your route. And now you can say, right, so if you might say yes, then that is my soft way of closing the sale and your soft way of saying yes. And then we can say, and then I move into the next question, which is, and how do you want me to send across the invoice? Like, what is the most appropriate way of doing it for you? Again, going back to the point I made earlier. And let's say you say, no, we're actually not ready to do that at the moment. I need to talk to my manager and get sign off, right? And then now I still don't know whether you're blowing me off. And if you are, I need to give you an out, as I say. And if that's genuinely the case, I need to understand when is the best time to follow up. Because if I go back to you tomorrow and you haven't spoken to the manager, now I'm going to come across too pushy. So then I'll say, okay, I understand that. So when would be a good time for me to follow up with you then? Like, when are you going to be meeting your manager? And if at that stage you say, I'm not sure, I'll get back to you, I'll walk away and I'll say, thanks very much. Let me know if you need anything else, because you need an out. And if they say, I'm going to be talking to her on the 14th. So, and then I would say, okay, so how about I follow up then maybe on the 16th or 17th? Would that be okay? Yep, that would be okay. Well, now we're in the kind of the amber zone. I don't know whether there is a manager or not, and I don't know what they're going to say, but at least I now know I'm going to go back to you at that stage. It's a bit of a dance, I know, but find your statement, like find your way of saying, So do you want me to, like, I remember talking to somebody about this who worked in a bank, and her line was, I think it might have been, say, I'm going to say a mortgage or an investment product. She would say, so will we make a start on the paperwork? That was her line. And if the person said, no, I need to go and talk to whoever, and then she'd have a follow-up question. And if she was kind of blown off after that, then that was that. But the point is, find your sentence, find a way of following up after that, as in find the time to follow up. And if the answer is no, that's okay. Like that's not a judgment of you. That is simply, maybe they were experimenting, maybe they're having a look around, maybe they're not at that stage. That's fine. You need to give people an out. You need to, or else it's too hard. And that's the way I do it. It's just find your question.
I know. And on the simplest terms, like that's so good. And then we are going to wrap up. I get my nails done every 3 weeks, and I hate getting my nails done. I hate spending the time. I hate driving there. I hate sitting there for the hour. Hate it off if they don't book me in. So they knew that my beautician have got really good at this. Maybe they've been on a course, but they've done what you do. So now I used to not go back, Susan, and then when you pull off your shellac and it rips your nails and you hate your nails and stuff, a big cycle. So anyway, now they say to me every single time when I get my nails done, would you like us to book you in for 3 weeks time, Caroline?
Yeah.
And they never used to do that, and I used to never book in, and then I never got it. And now I'm like standing at the counter going, I really should book in for 3. Oh, okay, I'll book. Or are you? And then they always say, or do you want to just wait until you eat it off? And then I'm like, oh no, book me in. So they've decided on, now we obviously have a humorous relationship, and they've decided on their strategy, but that works. And I now go every 3 weeks. And I said to them the other day, you are the best saleswomen because you book me in there and then before I leave. So it is that kind of principle, isn't it? Only I suppose different for different industries.
And do you think they should have a reason to feel bad for asking you that?
Absolutely not. I think it's unreal from a business perspective. I'm analysing it going, you are on fire, because I'm not leaving here without booking my next appointment. And that is the way you need to do it, because I need you in my life, but I would be complacent and not book you if you didn't force me to do that. Not force me, but encourage me to. So I think it's brilliant what they're doing, and it works. And why wouldn't I go back and not eat my nail polish off? So they're closing the sale in a great way. And I just think what you've said reminds me of them. And I think everybody maybe needs to implement a strategy like that to close the sale.
But also, Caroline, you've proven 2 other things that I mentioned earlier on. Number one is what they did was they increased the frequency of the deal by doing that. And the other thing is that they're not, imagine if they were saying, oh no, we can't do this now, we're afraid of taking Caroline's money, and then she won't want to do this. Whereas you've just said, like, we need them you need them in your life. And that the money that you spend on that is delivering more value than the value of the money itself. So it just, like, it's funny when you stand on the other side, which is where our customers are, they say, I need this service in my life, this product in my life. So, so give it to them.
Yeah, it's a disservice if you don't do it. So it's just confidence, I think, in our own working life, our own personalities and our own abilities to be able to do that. But people like you saying this out loud on a podcast and giving us real examples will make people think in their industries how they can do this. And it's important. Susan, oh my goodness, there's so much that we could talk about. Like, those are just wee key things, but you're so much more than an economist. You're a real life person who walks the walk and talks the talk, but also is so genuine and open with your advice. So I want to thank you for sharing all of that today. Like, those things that you've shared will and do actually change people's lives. Like, I'm sure you do know that, but like, you sharing that on here for free. I will say you didn't send me that email that said maybe it's coming up after, I don't know, but you did say you agreed to be on the podcast and share it. Like, thank you for doing that. It's amazing.
You're very welcome. And thank you indeed for having me and for reaching out to invite me to be here, Caroline. I really appreciate it.
How can people now, this is not the end, like they're going to be addicted to you like I am on LinkedIn every day, seeing what the advice is. Where is it? LinkedIn? Is that the best place to find you? How can people find you and follow your journey now?
Yep, certainly. LinkedIn is a good one. All right. I do share a lot there. All right. A lot of what I'm doing and where I am. And particularly what I said earlier is that I do something specific. I give the summaries of the events that I do host or that I speak at as well. So there's lots and lots of those up there. So LinkedIn is a good one. And also, if you'd like to go to thepositiveeconomist.com, we have a newsletter that we send out there too. And feel free to reach out, send me a DM on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to say hello.
Oh, you're the best. Thank you so much for being on the Dig podcast. Hopefully, and I hope this isn't the last time. I'm sure we're going to see each other out and about now. And because you're naturally drawn to people that there's just something about you. But thank you for being on the Dig podcast, and thank you for helping all the listeners.
Thanks, Caroline.